Dispel some major myths before tomorrow. I want to completely denounce all these crackpot, cockamamie theories that everybody's going to turn to flesh-eating zombies tomorrow when the emergency alert system goes off. I've never said that. I've never even suggested or hinted at that. I've never been adjacent to that crowd whatsoever. I've always suspected that this emergency alert exercise that is going to be taking place, for lack of better terms, tomorrow, this alert message that's going to be taking place tomorrow in the United States and Russia at the same time, which is baffling how nobody is talking about the connection there. But we'll talk about it in just a minute. I want to make it abundantly clear that these theories are amplified in the mainstream media so to make anybody who levies any sort of legitimate concern to make us look like complete and utter crackpots. My concern, and my only concern, has ever been the prospect of thermonuclear war, the prospect of a real deal, full meal deal pandemic with a high fatality rate, and climate chaos. We don't all have to agree on that, but I want to show you something that I've noticed lately, and perhaps this has been ongoing for a while and I just haven't noticed. But it's funny how these things always pertain to conflict, climate, and contagion. So I'm watching people talk about the FEMA, Federal Emergency Management. I'm not going to say the last word for reasons that I'm going to explain in 5 seconds. This is coming under every single YouTube video that presents this topic, that talks about this emergency alert situation tomorrow. And the reason why is because some completely moronic people are circulating dumbass theories that, of course, are amplified by the media, and immediately the powers that be seize on this as an opportunity to censor the information that can be disseminated. It happened during the pandemic. It happened, with the whole injecting this and that and 5G, blah, blah, blah. It happened with, the climate stuff, with the weather modification and blah, the list goes on. It always happens. And then they bring in the arbiter of truth, Wikipedia, supposedly a non-profit organization. Yet this non-profit organization is the one who is referenced as being the truth all the time. Never fails. Now, explain that to me some other day. Apparently, this is written by the community, and there isn't somebody behind the scenes pushing the buttons on and determining what is right and what is wrong and what gets edited and what doesn't. Regardless, I'm starting to see this on any video now, which tells me something, okay? Which tells me they're concerned about something. Are they concerned that is there people that are that dumb that believe that the government is going to turn us all into zombies tomorrow when the emergency alert goes off? It's possible, man. I mean, anything is possible nowadays. We're living in an idiocracy, so yes. I mean, when you go and you watch those videos of people who are, ask the most obvious questions, where is Ukraine, or do you support Ukraine and everything and blah, 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 and they can't find it on a map, and they point to like Australia or something. I mean, this is a real thing. It's a plague on our nation, but at the same time, I don't think that even if you were to tell those people, those same people who believe that, I don't think telling them that it wasn't that is going to change their minds at all. I'm here to say officially I completely denounce these utterly insane theories. What this is, and the reason why it is so concerning, is because it is happening contemporaneous with all of the other stuff that is going on in the world right now. From nuclear escalation on every possible front, wars flaring up, Serbia, Kosovo, which is just another small-scale version of what is going on with Russia and Ukraine. You have what's going on in the Middle East. You have China. You have Africa, you have the markets crashing, you have this disorder in the House of Representatives in the United States, okay? So all of this stuff is happening at the same time. It is total chaos. There are command and control planes in the air, doomsday planes in greater numbers than are typical. All nations are at a higher state of combat readiness right now, whether or not we want to admit it. is another story. I believe that the DEFCON level went up immediately after the balloon incident with China. I believe that that was the kind of green light to start, doing more with the NORAD. But so I do think that there's something to this in the sense that, okay, for starters, why are Russia and the United States simultaneously doing this on October 4th? Now, I recently was one of the people who broke that story about how on October 3rd, the Russians were going to be doing a first ever nuclear war, full-scale war simulation that didn't necessarily involve the entirety of their population, but it was going to be a concerted effort with various agencies in order to simulate what would happen and what the response would need to be if a full-scale nuclear war broke out. Now, I never knew that on October 4th, they were planning on doing a test of their own emergency alert system, just like we are doing here. And I never knew that. That was a surprise to me. I never learned that until a couple days ago. I knew about the other nuclear stuff, but I never realized that they were getting ready to do a nationwide public systems test on October 4th, on the same day as the United States. Now, is this somehow related to a now non-existent, or at least officially non-existent, nuclear treaty that was signed between the Russians and the United States? We know that since 2015, the United States has had a law that every 2 to 3 years they have to run this test of their emergency alert system. Now, some people claim that this has not happened since, since 2018. Others claim that it happened in 2021 for some. But it's very weird that these are both happening on the same day, and there's barely any media attention being paid to the fact that both are doing it on the same day. It's almost like just everybody's like, oh, Russia's doing it on the same day as the United States? Okay. People are so caught up in the idea that, this might be zombie land or whatever, or debating why it's stupid, which is what it's eventually going to be, which is why they have to put these public disclaimers on there. And it's the exact license they need, the powers that be need, to go in there and just completely regulate and monitor the internet. They love hearing those wild theories so that anybody who questions anything about the whole thing just gets immediately lumped in, because they know most people, they're busy, they're going about their day. They hear about the emergency alert stuff. Oh, you mean that conspiracy stuff I heard about the zombies? Yeah, those people are so stupid, right? And they just go on their merry way, right? And then when nothing happens, obviously, because that's not going to happen, they're going to be like, oh yeah, see, you conspiracy theorists talking about World War III or whatever. They'll lump it all into one basket, okay? That's the concern. So when you see these disclaimers under videos, that's definitely top down, and it's only for big issues. Now, I don't know, I'm probably guessing that this has been happening long before this most recent debacle with respect to conspiracy theories associated with the emergency alert system. But, it's the first time I had seen it. I actually seen it on a fellow YouTuber's video, Green Greg's, but he accidentally spelt it wrong. He put FMEA, and I wrote a comment on his video, and I said, wow, you really kind of dodged a bullet there, probably unknowingly. Actually, I originally thought that he might have done that on purpose, because he was aware of this, to try to, as a bit of a workaround, to kind of take the moderator's eyes off. Not that that guy has anything to worry about, because everything he says is rooted in scientific fact. He does a lot to dispel a lot of nonsensical theories that somehow get into the preparedness community. And it's not surprising. You're going to find these theories everywhere, okay? But this is the headline they love. No, October 4th National Emergency Alert Test won't turn you into a zombie. They want you to think about that and not the fact that this is happening in the current geopolitical climate that we're in, okay? In a geopolitical climate where the head of the German military today came out and said that we need to prepare for war with Russia. Nothing really new, because the UK and Germany have been saying that for some time. You have NATO fortifying all of the border countries, the Baltic countries. We talked about what's going on in the Black Sea. You had an emergency meeting take place in Kiev where 27 of the EU leaders, of the EU foreign ministers, I should say, descended on Kiev at the same time, the first time this has ever happened, just a day ago, and nobody is talking about it, okay? This is commonly known about stuff. It's on Al Jazeera. European foreign ministers have meeting in the Ukrainian capital of Kiev. A couple days ago, I released a video saying that there was something going on in Lublin, Poland. It appears as though that all of those ministers were convening in that region to be shuttled off by train to Kiev to talk about whatever. So you have this disarray in the House of Representatives. Is that going to benefit Ukraine? Is it not? Is it going to just lead to a government shutdown? And if it does that mean that there's a plan B in the books? Now, if you don't think there's a plan B, you remember when Joe Biden said, what was it, like probably 2 years ago or something like that? I think he said something along the lines of, we will, when asked about Nord Stream, if Germany or if Russia invaded Ukraine, that Nord Stream would cease to exist. It's public record, it's open, it's out there, it's probably one of the most meme clips around in this space. And then what happens just a few years, after Russia invades, lo and behold, 6 months down the road, and Nord Stream is blown up. I'm not saying I have any evidence to suggest. Nobody really knows who exactly did it. People can talk about the benefactors, which are pretty obvious. Obviously, the people who sell liquid natural gas. Some people think the whole war is just about natural gas. And it may well be just about natural gas, military-industrial complex, but it could also have something to do with global finance. So my concern is, in the next 45 days, are they going to pull out a plan B? Is there a Gulf of Tonkin style incident that is on the horizon to try to push through some emergency powers or whatever the case, executive order? I don't even know how the American political system works. I don't know what power Biden has to override certain things. I presume as the president, he has more power in certain respects than our prime minister does, maybe not as much in others, but I don't know enough about the American political. I was just learning about it a lot today, in fact, with respect to how the whole pro tempore Speaker of the House, who happens to be more pro-Ukraine than McCarthy was, is now going to be in there until they can find somebody. Was this a 4D chess move by the Democrats to vote McCarthy out? I mean, who knows what is exactly going on? But my concern is that if they really want to ramp this up, maybe there's a plan B. And again, it's just a big maybe. To me, that is something that has legs. That is something which seems like a legitimate speculation in light of everything that has gone on, that maybe some special ops, can justify telling us some more noble lies to push us deeper into a greater conflict in the future, if they cannot reach any sort of agreement on Ukraine aid. Now, the narrative right now in and around Ukraine, it's important to note, is this. We're starting to see this a lot. Now, we got to remember what Biden said just a couple months before they left Afghanistan. We will never abandon the Afghanistan people, or something to that effect. Things are going great in Afghanistan. 1 month later, people are dangling off giant planes trying to fly out the country, okay? So when they say things like everything's going to be fine, Ukraine has our unwavering support, is this the exit? Okay, is this really the exit? Again, I don't know exactly what is happening here. I'm humbled to the fact that because I'm not on the front line, I don't know the back channel. I don't know why the United States and Russia are holding simultaneous emergency alert broadcast system things on the same day. I don't know that much, and nobody's talking about it. So how could I possibly be able to see through the fog of war when it's so thick? I don't think anybody can. And from what I tell, I subscribe to an equal amount of pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian channels on multiple platforms, because I try to get the most accurate, objective view of things as I possibly can. And both sides have compelling arguments. Both sides really do have compelling arguments. That might sound strange to either side. Okay, and it's starting to look like on the surface, if I was just to look on the surface news information that's coming out, yeah, it looks like Ukraine isn't doing that well at all and is possibly on the brink of collapse. However, we also know that the Western, all this talk about we're running out of ammo, they haven't even started giving them the really long-range weapons yet. What are they called? The JDAMs or JSAMs or whatever they are. They haven't even, we're still on the level of should we send ATACMS? Well, they've already approved ATACMS. But there's a lot of tools in the toolbox that have yet to even be deployed in this conflict. So to act as if, okay, maybe Ukraine's on the back foot, but maybe they want it that way. Maybe this whole media campaign in the last couple days that West is running out of ammunition, which is insane because that's what we were saying about the Russians a year ago, and nobody seems to care anymore. We have such a short-term memory. We're so easy to manipulate. But what if this is all just a ruse? And I really don't think that our leaders are this smart at this point. I think they're just shooting from the hip. I mean, you would have thought, okay, maybe Afghanistan was a 4D chess move when Biden said, things are going to be great. But it just seems like they're flying by the seat of their pants. They don't have a long-term plan. I'm inclined to think that, however, in this case, that there may be something to this, because I've heard multiple theories. I've heard conflicting theories. And you can't just accept the Russians' numbers at Rybar that 500,000 people have been. So their numbers are starting to become as inflated, if not wildly more inflated than the Ukrainian numbers. And maybe there's some truth to both sides. I don't think it's as severe as both sides are saying because, again, think about the hospital overwhelm during the pandemic. We're just not, at least as far as I can tell, I'm sure it's happening. You're just not seeing, enough images of these overfilled hospitals to necessitate a lot of these allegations. Now, a lot of these guys are just going to the morgue. So maybe but a lot of them, for every death, there's probably more casualties than there are deaths. So you would think that the hospitals would just be, that would be, the biggest news of all is, we got to get medical care for all these guys and the Red Cross and all that stuff. But it doesn't seem to be getting as much media attention. But maybe I'm wrong about that. But I think that this whole Western allies say that they're running out of ammunition campaign is probably due to a couple of reasons. Number one, it could just be a good old Austerlitz play. It's a good old, let's bait the Russians into let's pretend we're weak so that the Russians decide to throw everything in there. Will the Russians take the bite? Because this is a game of chess at this point in time, especially when you have this World War I style maneuver warfare where every move, can be clearly seen from satellites. So you have to play pretend a lot. You have to pretend you're going to do something when you're not. You have to pretend you're incapable of doing something when you are. This is a classic Sun Tzu art of war style conflict. So when they say this, that we're running out, maybe they're not really running out. Maybe they have another plan up their sleeve. However, the other possibility is that this is the justification they need to go on a full-on, full-scale war economic footing in terms of turning on all the machines that they're going to need or kickstarting the industry. And I talked about this last year, and this is the problem with a lot of my predictions is that they're always like a year or two too early, and people always forget what I talked about. I made a video specifically dedicated towards this, right? Is that, when the economic times really start to get hard, as they are right now, because the market is crashing hard, if you haven't noticed, that's when they need to galvanize the people towards military armament production. So to stimulate the economy. Is this how they're going to stimulate the economy? Let's start making bullets. Let's start making rounds. But the problem is that support for Ukraine across multiple spectrums in multiple countries is starting to wane a little bit. Most members of the House, most Republicans, the majority of Republicans still support sending aid to Ukraine. Whatever that might mean. I'm sure there's some people like hardcore extremists like Lindsey Graham who, would send nukes if they could. Then there's other people who maybe are okay with sending financial aid. But eventually it's going to get to the point where it's either going to become cost prohibitive to continue the attritional war, and they're going to have to ratchet up the tension. They're going to have to up the ante. They're going to have to just say, okay, we're going to extend the nuclear umbrella over Ukraine because this conventional war is starting to bankrupt everybody, except, of course, the military-industrial complex who decided to meet with Zelensky the other day. And you know, the funny thing about how, I'm going on tangents here, but the funny thing I noticed, and just an observation before I forget, and remember where you heard this first, it's funny how they get Zelensky in these military fatigues to make it look real and authentic, and at the same time, they employ this large video production team to get all these crazy cinematic angles and stuff. Like, those two things don't line up. So I posted a comment on Zelensky's Twitter and I just said, look, you know, people would buy this more if you just shot these videos on your cell phone. You know, you don't want the gimbals and the side-scrolling slider. You know, there's a lot of video equipment that they're employing that clearly is beyond just a simple, you know, what you're accustomed to, like your simple news broadcasting camera being pointed at a bunch of people talking. People buy that. The more they make it look like a movie, especially at this point, the more people are going to be like, this is just weird. I don't buy this anymore, right? So anyways, on the topic of Ukraine having that nuclear umbrella extended over them, apparently there is a Latvian politician who is now calling for that very thing, or sorry, a Lithuanian one. Minister Landsbergis called on NATO to close Ukraine with a nuclear umbrella. Now, I've always said that they would not be building weapons manufacturing facilities in Ukraine if there wasn't at least a high degree of confidence that they were not going to be immediately blown up. I mean, why would you invest your money in that? It would just be completely stupid. Do they have the missile defense systems to protect these facilities? Or is there some sort of unspoken agreement that Russia just isn't going to attack those regions anymore? This is what I mean. We don't know exactly what is going on. Zelensky keeps calling it Russia's full-scale war. Well, where's the full-scale war when people are still dancing in nightclubs in Kiev? Now, I'm not saying that they have it easy there. I'm not on the front line. I'm not having people I know, friends, family, extended family blown apart by this conflict. So I'm not trying to minimize the struggle that they're in over there. However, a full-scale war means something entirely different when we've seen what happened in Iraq, when we've seen what happened in World War II or Vietnam, where they carpet bomb the place with napalm and they spray it with infectious toxic chemicals. Okay, so this is not a full-scale war, but they keep calling it that. Anyways, so it's only a matter of time, I think, before they take that route, because they're exhausting their conventional weapons stockpiles, either side, and either side has to start now. The more we deplete, and this is the thing, this should almost be, you could make this into a graphic, okay, for all you artistic people out there who know something about computers. In fact, I'll probably get one of my guys to make this. You have a certain amount of conventional weapons on both sides, okay? The more those conventional weapons arsenals deplete and inventories go down and down and down, the greater the likelihood the use of what increases? Nuclear, chemical, biological. Okay? So the less conventional weapons, the greater the likelihood that they have to resort to unconventional weapons. It's probably just a 1-to-1 ratio, and it's just a matter of who gets there first. And if both sides are anticipating this, that the other side is going to run out of conventional munitions, then their corresponding state of nuclear readiness also has to increase. Even if they still do have a large supply of conventional weapons, they know that the other guy doesn't, and that he's probably thinking, okay, maybe now it's time to use the F-35s. So realistically, what I see playing out is you have Europe, the greater Europe, and Finland, from Finland down to the Baltics, down to Poland, to Bulgaria, to Western Ukraine, all preparing for the future war, the big war in the future, which will be this war against Russia. Now, who knows when that's going to happen, if it's going to happen. if it even remains at the conventional level where something like that could happen. But they're wanting to extend Article 5 to Ukraine. They want them to become a member of the EU, whatever that means. And maybe this is how they're going to skirt that Article 5 thing. They'll say, well, it's a joint effort by the EU and not NATO, so it's not the North Atlantic Alliance, it's just the European Union acting independently of that, so therefore it doesn't have to be a nuclear thing because the United States isn't necessarily involved directly. So who knows, man? But what we do know is that Germany is preparing to send thousands of troops to the Russian border state of Lithuania, the same place where this guy is talking here. Why would they possibly need to do this? Why is Ukraine going to mobilize another 500,000 guys? And why the hell? I mean, I understand that Ukraine is probably stretched for manpower. But you always hear, oh, we're training the Ukrainians. The Brits are training the Ukrainians. You know, the Italians or the Canadians are training the Ukrainians. In what? What could the Ukrainians not train themselves better in that people over here who've never experienced high intensity combat, if anything, is probably the other way around. Maybe maybe it's just the Ukrainians going over there to teach the Brits and the Canadians and the Americans even, who've never fought a war on such a high level of intensity. Yeah, the Vietnam War was tough, but this is much higher casualty rates, okay, especially for our side. So, I always hear that, like, and I always just intuitively, like, wait a minute, they're the ones with all the experience. Now, it's very likely that they're preoccupied doing other things, and this training is just, bringing them up to the level of being a functional, competent soldier who knows where to point his firearm and can run a few drills and stuff like that. And that then the main training takes place on the front. That's probably what it is. But make no mistake, Ukraine right now is the strongest fighting force in Europe, bar none. I mean, these are the guys who know exactly how to navigate this new age drone-based trench warfare like nobody else in Europe. It's the guys on the ground. So if anybody's going to be training anybody, it's going to be Ukraine that is training the rest of Europe when this war inevitably spreads. So Russia had another L today. Armenia has signed the Roman Statute. So now they are obligated, if Putin ever were to go to Armenia, which I don't know if he ever would at this point in time. I think the only places he's going is China, and he doesn't seem to be going any place that's not along the land border of Russia. But they would be obligated to arrest him and take him to The Hague, which, almost with that being that close to the border, almost guarantees that situation is going to spiral out of control. You have the Kosovo situation spiraling out of control, in which Serbia is to Russia as Kosovo is to Ukraine. Okay, that's as far as I understand it, sort of. Not exactly, and I don't want to get into the history of, when something became a state or whatever. That's essentially what it is, even in terms of proportional firepower and manpower. It's a very close comparison, and of course NATO being on the side of Kosovo, now sending 600 troops. They have a much smaller army, but of course they are the defenders. So Serbia then needs now a substantially larger military in order to be able to take that back and annex that territory. Once again, it's gonna come at a high cost, it looks like. So you have all these wars just flaring up all over Europe right now at the same time, and it doesn't look good. If this economy continues to tank, that's not going to be good for anybody. Every time you hear that the economy is getting worse, when the economy is getting better, even if it is just people who have FOMO and they're putting their money in the markets because they don't know what else to do and it's not real and the price to earnings ratios are sky high and unachievable, at least not for the next 20, 30 years. Even that is a bit of a hedge. It insulates us against the prospect of the war getting much worse, because when people were making money and when trade is growing across borders, armies don't have to cross borders. But now that the market is crashing like crazy in the past couple weeks, that's very concerning, because that just puts strain on everybody. The people in countries start to get riled up, they start to protest. Countries, that puts pressure on politicians who have to be perhaps more hawkish in certain respects, more aggressive in their negotiation. So it creates more conflict. Scarcity that comes from economic austerity leads to an intensification of conflicts all over the world. Right now, the US dollar index is flying high. And if you're wondering why the price of gold is down, I do not look at the price of gold at all. And I know there's some people, you'll buy gold at, maybe you bought gold at $2,100 this year and you're thinking, oh man, I lost 10%. But you didn't lose 10%, because the time when you actually bought the gold, the dollar was just worth approximately more or less 10% less. That's all there is to it. And we know that the prices of gold are artificially suppressed. I think there might be an affiliate gold link in my description, but it's nothing that I make any money off of, to be brutally honest. And I've made a small amount of money off that in the past, but gold margins are so small anyways that it's nothing. For me, I don't even know how companies stay in business doing it. But it's something that I put there because I want people to be diversified, but I'm not like one of these gold bug people who at the beginning of every show, it's like buy gold and silver here and blah, blah, blah. But it's a sensible thing to do, especially if you watched our video with Rafi Farber. He's going to be coming back. He breaks down how gold is undeniably at the core of our financial system. No matter how much they try to deny it, no matter how much they try to associate it with conspiracy theory, I wouldn't be surprised if in the not so distant future, instead of having a I'll just say it, FEMA. Okay, there we go. Now the algorithm's going to put one of these below my video. You're going to have something like U.S. Treasury Department or, something like that, right? And that's when you know things are going to get hot. That's why I'm very concerned by this, because it's almost a signal, because you've seen this right at the beginning of the pandemic, right? This is what they put on there, because maybe some people like myself were saying things that got people to think a bit more critically, so they amplify those morons in their crazy nut job conspiracy theories so that they can have justification to come in and crack down. Please do not circulate that crap. I had somebody close to me say, hey, is this real? And because, I surround myself with fairly intelligent people, and I was just a little disappointed that was the case. So anyways, Brian Keating sent me this. He didn't send it to me. He tweeted it out. And life expectancy in the United States falls behind other rich countries. Look at this. Sinking like a stone. I'll get my big head out of there. Sorry. Sinking like a stone, man. Like just bam. What the frick happened? Look at that. There's a gap of nearly 10 years between Japan and the United States. Wow. Speaking of emergency alerts, if you're in Canada, we're going to be having one of those emergency alert things on November 11th. And we've had them here all along. Okay, we've had them, I think, twice a year. November 15th, I believe, is going to be the next time the emergency alert system goes off here. I'm not overly concerned about it. It is what it is. What I am concerned about is the increased attention and lack of attention at the same time by the government towards civil defense. Or let me rephrase that. The attention towards the potential for emergencies and the lack of real tangible progress made on civil defense. So they're not building any more bunkers. They're not putting a bunch of food away for us. They're not putting more missile defense in and around the capital cities. Canada is completely screwed if it goes down, especially in wintertime. But that's what it's going to be. It's just going to be a national test. The national test will help ensure that wireless emergency alerts And the emergency alert system continue to be effective ways to warn the public about emergencies, particularly those on the national level. So on its face, as a prepper, this is a good thing. This is what you would want. You would want the government to notify you if the shit was going to hit the fan. But unfortunately, when they do notify us, it's either going to be too little or too late, or it's going to be for the purpose of crowd control and, just making sure that we don't congest the roadways, the airwaves, and the airways in ways that might impede continuity of government. That's all there is to it. And, in the grand scheme of things, if you want your country to survive, you have to be willing to make some concessions and sacrifices. I personally would never depend on my country or my countrymen for my well-being under those set of circumstances. That's why I'm a prepper. I don't expect the government to have a bunker for me somewhere. Now, there might be some people who are just getting by. We released a bunker video today which talked about an Anderson shelter, which would be a formidable fallout shelter. It's certainly not going to withstand a direct nuclear blast. I mean, not much will. But, it's a corrugated metal and sandbags. That's all it is. You can do a hell of a lot with sandbags. So, I don't know why they're not encouraging people to just stockpile some sandbags, and if most people got sand in their yard. Yeah, it takes some work, and how much time are you going to have to fill the sandbags? Whatever. It's something. Most people have a little garden somewhere. You can fill it with earth, and that will basically attenuate the radiation, and it should be 3 feet of earth, okay, because not everybody's going to have a below ground basement. Some of those basements stick up above ground. So, there's ways to do this, but if you get yourself an Anderson shelter, or if you can make one, they're pretty easy to makeshift. I think during World War II, the Brits made something like 3.5 million. One for most inhabitants who had a house, probably just the rich people. But there's things you can do, okay? And so what I'm trying to say is people are going to say I'm apologist for the government's lack of preparedness, especially when compared to Moscow, where apparently for their alert system, the alert that they're going to get is how to direct them to the nearest bunker, because their population actually cares about them there. They share some kind of affinity with their people, I guess, that we just have lost here in this melting pot disarray of cultures and ideas, which is great. Don't get me wrong. It's one of our strengths. It's also possibly our Achilles heel when it comes to long-term continuity of government. Authoritarian governments will prevail in the apocalypse. That's all there is to it. And we're going to have a bit of an authoritarian learning curve when martial law is imposed. It's probably not going to go so well. Okay, when World War III hits, I guarantee you, there's going to be that guy who thinks that, it was just, it was all a hoax. And, people will be dying in their nuclear shelters, right? Puking, their guts and their hairs falling out. And they're going to be talking about how their government, that this was a false flag or something, right? So, look, I'm not making any apologies for our government's lack of civil defense. And when I say our governments, I mean North America. Canada, United States, we're in the same boat. But I don't depend on them for shit. Why would I depend on them? I mean, look at what is happening right now. Why would you ever depend on these people for anything? I mean, they're just doing what they got to do. They are not going over and above in any respect whatsoever. Okay, so you're going to get a presidential alert says this is a test of the National Wireless Emergency Alert System. No action is needed. It's also going to be broadcast on the radio and television. I don't know how that works with digital television now. If it's like if it comes across on any, like if you're watching Netflix, I'm sure it's going to come on the screen. But I have something that I want you guys to do, and I probably should have said this at the beginning of the video. I actually intended to, but I forgot. I'm just rambling in all different directions. I want you guys to do me a favor and make note of where you are when you get the alert. And just ask yourself, if this was real world, if it was real world, would you be able, or what would you do in that situation? How ready would you be in that situation? And I know the time that it's supposed to happen, but I'm not going to say the time. Now that I said that, you're all going to go out and look and see when it is. when it's going to happen. But there's something to be learned from the spontaneity of it, because, you know, you might be stuck in traffic. You get that emergency alert. You might be in the grocery store standing in line. You know, you might be having an argument, road rage incident. I mean, you never know what's going on, but just take note of where you are and how ready you would be, and whether or not, if it was real world, how quickly could you spring into action? What would your set of circumstances be shortly thereafter? Okay, so use this as a learning exercise. Let's hope it's just an exercise. I mean, you know, anything's possible, but I also don't want to put that out there that, oh, I think, you know, this is going to be nuclear Armageddon. We should probably talk about this. It could be, though. I mean, it's preparing for that. That's the only reason why they're doing a nationwide emergency alert. There's not many other things except maybe a meteor, asteroid or something that would require that. So the Russians are getting ready to test out a nuclear-powered missile. And it's experimental warhead. David Pine was the first one who talked about this on our channel probably about, I don't know, over a year ago now. It's called Skyfall. It's a nuclear-powered cruise missile. And so it's going to fly at a very, I don't think it's very fast as far as I know, but they're calling it the Chernobyl of the skies. Of course, the West is calling it that. It has a range of around 22,000 kilometers. Now, interestingly, because it flies slower, okay, it can actually stay up in the air a lot longer. So they're saying that this has the potential to possibly stay up in the air for around 14 days. And this is something that can fly low. It can use a circuitous route, which minimizes detection by radar and air defense. So it can change directions. And I guess it just has a low radar signature. Angular design minimizes radar signature. So they're working on this just to, you know, try to have full-scale strategic dominance. And people are concerned that that's what's going on in Novaya Zemlya. Now, the question is, does this constitute a nuclear test if they actually put nuclear fuel in it? They've done this test multiple times before, but I don't know if they've ever actually used nuclear fuel in the missiles that they've tested. If they do use nuclear fuel in it, is it a violation of some now defunct, non-existent treaty? That is the question, okay? Any other pieces of news we need to discuss? Oh, this is interesting. NATO is concerned about the disappearance of 20,000 PMC Wagner fighters. Where did they go all of a sudden? They just disappeared. A 20,000 strong group of Wagner fighters stationed in Belarus disappeared from the field of view of the collective West, a report from the Ukrainian military intelligence has said. NATO satellites could not detect the movements of PMC personnel and their military hardware in places of their permanent deployment in the Republic of Belarus. Are they underground? Are they tunneling under the earth? Are they getting ready? What they're suspecting is, and this is Russian media, that the West is suspecting, and Kiev is suspecting, that they may be preparing to do an offensive on Kiev. Okay? So that's what they think. And it's going to be led by Prigozhin's son. Prigozhin's son. Yes. Prigozhin's son takes over Wagner's elite unit returning to Ukraine. You just can't make this stuff up. You really can't. I don't even know what to believe anymore. This is kind of weird too. So Slovakia, remember I was telling you the other day, you know, no country is going to bite the hand that feeds its military industrial complex. This is why when people are like, oh, Slovakia with their 23% voted in government are suddenly going to be the thing that shifts Europe towards a anti-Ukrainian footing. Likely never going to happen. For starters, there's 80% of the population that didn't vote for that guy. The other reason is that Slovakia gets weapons from the United States. So if they want these F-16s, first F-16 Block 70 fighter will soon be shipped to Europe. Slovakia is set to take delivery of Lockheed jets. If they want to lock in these Lockheed jets, then they got to play ball. It's as simple as that. Not that they are, even though they're obsolete, likely, compared to the newer stuff. You know, I don't think anybody's making any big moves right now that aren't strategic without, the US's say so. I don't think anybody's deviating too far from the course. They'll pretend to, but only, then they get taken into the room, to the dark room, as Bill Gates, who am I thinking of? The comedian. What's his name again? Everybody thought he used to look like Alex Jones. Somebody help me out here. You guys know. Tool used one of his samples in a song. Oh man, I should know this because he used to be one of my favorite comedians. Anyways, drifting off again. 55 Chinese sailors feared dead after a nuclear submarine gets caught in a trap intended to snare British and U.S. vessels in the Yellow Sea. Apparently this happened a while ago. China's been on silent lately. North Korea's been on silent. Everything right now has been overshadowed by what's going on with the politics of the United States, which I don't say this too often, guys. When I always hate it when people say everything's a distraction. Something happens. Oh, it's just a distraction away from this and that. Well, even if people were focused on that, what would really happen anyways? Probably nothing significant. But, this actually starts. If there ever was a deep state distraction and you got the markets crashing, you got NATO and Russia on the brink of nuclear Armageddon, it's a great time to maybe just get everybody fighting and watching this soap opera about, who's going to be the next Speaker of the House and all this other political riffraff. Let me know what you guys think about that in the comment section below, and please let me know if maybe I'll release another dedicated video about that very thing. Where are you going to be when the exercise is run, the emergency alert exercise in the United States? Let me know.